let's move on to the other big item, also involving the United States. I don't know how many people in the international space have heard of this, or if it's mostly a thing that the United States is like confined to the United States borders as far as like the flow of news. To set the stage, a little while ago, there was a court battle going on, or like a legal dispute, between Texas and the federal government over border policy. You see, Texas is run by fucking psychos who want to kill large numbers of migrants. They literally put razor wire in the water of the Rio Grande with the express purpose of killing migrants that are attempting to cross the river. And in fact, it had that effect. Part of what flared up the scandal into like an active political situation was that a mother and son, I think, her very young son, were killed by the razor wire in the water. Either that, or they were like ensnared and then drowned. Some very grisly situation such as that. And the federal government, Border Patrol, went down to the border in an effort for once to actually try to rescue migrants from drowning and from being ensnared in the razor wire. Ordinarily I'm no fan of Border Patrol, but they're not as bad as Texas, at least as like the Texas State Guard, National Guard, whoever. And speaking of, they actually ran into Texas National Guardsmen when they went down there, the Border Patrol, because the governor of Texas had ordered those National Guardsmen to block the feds from removing the razor wire from the water. And this was when the expressed purpose of the Border Patrol was to see if they could rescue migrants on their way over to the United States and send them to places where they could properly be processed. This culminated in a Supreme Court ruling recently, quite recently, just a couple of days ago, where the court ruled, no, Texas, you can't stop the federal government from removing this razor wire. They are allowed to do that, because the border policy is the purview of the federal government, right? And Texas decided, what if we just don't do what the Supreme Court says, right? And so they didn't. They didn't obey that ruling. But they didn't stop there. That's not all they did. They also took it a step further by posturing. Greg Abbott wrote this letter, this statement about how, the federal government is soft on border policy and we're doing our duty to deter illegal immigration or whatever. And this standoff only has intensified, where the federal government, both explicitly in the Constitution and now with the sanction of the courts, has the authority to tell Texas to fuck off. Other red states have decided, no, actually, we're on Texas's side here. Fuck the federal government, and we love killing migrants. 25 red states have signed a joint statement expressing support for Texas. At least their governors have. But more than that, it beyond just like words on paper kind of support, there are a number of states, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 states have actually sent detachments of their own National Guard, their own military forces, to help Texas in their standoff against the feds. Which is not good. It's really not good. And I have a couple thoughts on this. Will this turn into a full-blown civil war? I don't know. Probably not. A lot of people are invoking civil war as a talking point to describe what's happening, and that's certainly not inaccurate. I mean, the lead up to the Civil War was certainly marked by the southern states having a decidedly rebellious reaction, sort of like this, to anything the federal government decided to do. Particularly regarding the issue of slavery, whereas here the issue of the day is immigration. But I think what's more likely is that this is kind of a long play, right? There's all sorts of military posturing right now, and it is possible that like this spills over into actual conflict. But, you know, obviously in the event of that, we all know that the federal government would win that. The United States has the most powerful military in the world. You know, any loose coalition of states within the U.S. would not stand a chance. What's probably going to happen is that this simmers down in one of a few ways, right? Let me just put this here up. Let me rack my brain for a second. Yeah, there's one of three ways this could go, from where I'm seeing things, right? Number one is my preferred outcome. Biden sends in federal troops, goes full tilt, takes control of the National Guard from these states, because ultimately those National Guard regiments answer to the president, not the governors of their states, and occupies Texas. Legit, like Reconstruction 2, send in federal troops, occupy Texas, you know, say, no, you don't actually get to kill migrants, and we don't trust you to not kill migrants because you're willing to defy a fucking Supreme Court ruling that told you not to do that. So we're going to occupy you until we trust that you can, like, not kill migrants. And in that event, this issue kind of gets quelled and is more or less addressed. I'm not going to say it goes away forever because I can't see into the future. But possibilities number 2 and 3 are more likely, and they're a little bit more concerning. Possibility number 1 in this scenario, Reconstruction 2, in my opinion, very based. You don't want states to be doing this kind of stuff, especially when it violates international law, and like conventions regarding human rights. Possibility number 2 is that Biden doesn't go full tilt, but does do some level of response to this. Maybe that he addresses Texas specifically, but leaves the other states out of it mostly, or he like does some sort of wishy-washy negotiation, strikes some sort of compromise where like he doesn't actually directly sort of put the governor of Texas in his place, but rather just sort of convinces him to stand down or whatever. I don't know how likely that is, that specific scenario that I described, but like some version of that might happen. And I think in that event, that's sort of like kicking the can down the road, right? Like you haven't explicitly given permission to the states to do this. You haven't like really shown an enormous amount of weakness, but it's also like light-handed enough that states might think they could get away with something like this in the future, right? That's possibility number 2 out of 3. Possibility number 3 is that Joe Biden doesn't do anything. This is a possibility that I don't particularly like, but it is a very real possibility, and I would be doing a disservice to everybody if I didn't acknowledge that. Where, like, Joe Biden doesn't even do the bare minimum sort of wishy-washy response, and just tries, like, only extremely tepidly to be like, alright, let's all calm down here, haha, and then the red states basically say, no, fuck you, we're gonna keep doing this, and receive no repercussion. In that scenario, I think that is actually the beginning of the end of the United States. And I know this is very, like, the West has fallen, billions must die language, but in the event that, like, Joe Biden doesn't do anything, or at the very least doesn't do enough to sort of quell the issue for now, red states particularly will say, like, oh, so we could do something like this in the future, and Joe Biden won't really get mad enough at us to do anything, right? And that's like, effectively, it's a green light for red states, especially, to engage in this sort of behavior, maybe with regards to immigration, but particularly with regards to other issues like queer rights, trans rights, all that sort of thing. And it like, you start getting scenarios that might be reminiscent of the book The Disunited States of America, which is a book where, like, the U.S. never adopted the Constitution and still had the Confederation, like, Articles of Confederation government. and it's not good. Those are the three scenarios I have in mind, particularly. It's possible somewhere in between those gets picked. And I know this seems like a lot, and you may be wondering, there's a key assumption. Why would other states want to do this, right? Like, I know I did just say that, like, Republicans hate migrants and they're actually evil. But, like, what's the real answer? What's more complicated, right? There's got to be a more complicated explanation. And there is. Republicans have this playbook, right? A lot of parties will put out their party platform and whatever. Republicans have Project 2025, right? Is basically their plan for, as they phrase it, a conservative takeover of American government, or like conservative victory, as they call it. It's a little bit whitewashed language. Effectively, they want to have like far-right conservative supermajorities by any means necessary, violating any rule that they need to, etc., etc. Part of that playbook is actually to do the states' rights bit from like the antebellum days, where, you know, they do their whole draconian anti-immigration, anti-queer, whatever agenda in their own states, and then when the federal government tries to fight them on it, they fight back and try to basically out-bravado the federal government in order to get away with this kind of policymaking. And if the federal government ever concedes on that, then it's basically sort of giving away the whole point, that like, now you've admitted, well, the federal government can't stop the states, either because it literally can't or because it doesn't want to bad enough. And that's sort of the driving force behind all of this. You know, it seems like this was a little bit out of nowhere in some ways, but it was also part of a larger conservative strategy that they were going to try this at some point. They were going to try something like this at some point, you know, defying federal rulings and federal rules and laws and whatever. It just happened to be that the wedge that they started this on was immigration and the razor wire in the water down in Texas. Although, again, I want to assuage people's worst fears. I don't think this is going to become a full-blown civil war. It could become like a sectional crisis. There could be some, like, spikes in like membership of right-wing militant groups and whatever. I think it's very unlikely that this would become a civil war, because it'd be really ugly if it did. You guys have seen those memes about like modern civil wars be like, and there's 30 different factions of rebels. It would be like that, but instead of the rebels controlling the majority of the country, it would be the American government controlling the majority of the country. The rebels would lose instantly, you know? And I think right-wingers kind of know that. They don't actually want to risk it for the biscuit too much, because they're well, I would say they're cowardly, but that implies a loaded framing that doesn't necessarily have to exist in this instance. They just don't want to die. I'm dead. So to recap, there's a standoff between the Texas National Guard, the National Guard from various other red states, and the federal government. The federal government is unambiguously in the right. They are trying to save migrants. They have the backing of the law behind them. And the question is, will they do anything? Will they like forcefully put down the military efforts of these states to turn the border into like a DMZ? And if the answer is yes, they you know, Sherman goes burning again, they occupy Texas, whatever. Then cool, this was a one-off crisis, and, you know, that's pretty bad, but ultimately the issue's been addressed, and states don't feel like trying that shit again. But if the answer is no, the federal government isn't willing to actually intervene, they just sort of want to stand there and say, hey, you can't do that, then, like, there's no United States anymore, because the federal government is voluntarily powerless. Why do I bring this up? I bring it up because it's breaking news, and it's indicative of actually one of the problems I have with liberals in America. Well, just liberals in general. The reason I mention law, right, is not necessarily because I care all that much about about like what the law says. I don't give that too much regard when I'm like forming my opinions on stuff and whatever. You know, the law should be a reflection of ethics and not the other way around. You know, so if the law aligns with ethics, then great, cool. But if it doesn't, then that's dumb and stupid. And the law is stupid. But liberals do care a lot about the law. You know, like a lot of the liberal movements of the Enlightenment were all about equality under the law, right? And I think obviously, you know, that was a good step up from what existed in the Middle Ages, right? You know, you had serfs everywhere, and like people who were literally not allowed, like on paper, to participate in society in certain ways. But with modern liberalism, right? You know, the law arguments, the like arguments about justice under the law only really hold up if you're actually willing to apply that. You know, it only matters if you're willing to say, okay, well, you broke the law, and now we're going to punish you for doing that, right? There's never been any, like, there's never really been any dissonance there when it comes to poor people breaking the law, right? Or people who aren't, like, doing some sort of crime against society at large in such a scale that, like, politicians would, you know? Like, you know, you go out there and kill somebody. Of course that's gonna land you in prison if anybody finds out about it. And as well it should. But when Republicans launch foundational attacks on democracy, believe it or not, that is illegal. Most of the stuff that the Republicans do with respect to, like, election denial and threatening their political opponents, hell, one Republican in, like, a local race ordered a hit on his opponent. Most of this stuff is illegal, and, like, really illegal. And it should not only be, like, implicating that one person that took part in it, but also, like, the rest of the party that refused to actively distance themselves from it, right? In this case, we have various governors, 25 governors, committing effectively treason against the United States by saying, oh, we're willing to supply troops to a military force against the government of the United States. That is treason. That is secession. But because they're governors, because they have clout, because, I don't fucking know, because they're your respected colleagues or whatever, all of a sudden the willingness of liberals to enforce the rule of law decays away in an instant. It's kind of like how a lot of liberals in Germany will talk about the AfD. Oh, we can't ban them. They're a minority party. Or like when the AfD was first coming around in Germany, that's the, like, neo-Nazi party. A lot of the liberals said, "Oh, we can't ban them. They're just a tiny little nothing party that would make us look weak." And then once they gained ground in the parliament, the liberals switched to, "We can't ban them. They have power now. They have too big of an electorate." Like, the entire game of modern liberalism is creating rules specifically to then never enforce them. Unless it's against progressives, in which case they will enforce those rules all fucking day. You know, we find ourselves, I think, in a similar situation in the US, where Republicans have decided that they will just do any and everything. And part of the reason they've decided that is because they know from experience that the Democrats, their political opponents, the liberals in charge of the system, aren't going to punish them for it. You know? The fascists have made this a fight, and the liberals are refusing to, like, put their fists up, or something like that. And of course, recently, the Democrats have been much more willing to talk about the Republicans in a certain light of, like, oh yeah, they're fascists who hate democracy, but they're not really willing to act on it. And even in that case, where I'm being, like, a little bit more charitable to liberals, it's not, you know, most of the Democratic Party, in terms of their politicians or consultants or whatever, are not like that. They're still, like, kind of milquetoast on the issue. Really disappointing, I think. But, I don't know, I guess not too surprising. Like I said, you know, it was kind of... It was not that hard to see this coming, because this is ultimately a part of the Republican playbook for 2025. Like, their strategists explicitly, like, put this together as a means of, like, coming back into power again and stuff. Although thankfully there wasn't that much going on Sunday, or so I thought. That happens. Good to see you're doing better. Yes, thank you. And I am feeling a lot better today than I was on Sunday. As you're rested now, you're my favorite racist after all. Thank you, Flat Earth Dennis. Glad to know I'm in high regard. Whew. I thought there wasn't that much happening on Sunday, and even if there was, I wasn't really prepared to talk much about it. But now I realize, oh shit, there was actually everything happening. So let me see if I can't pull up the other thing I was thinking of that is relevant to the namesake of the stream, because there's a couple constituent parts. You know, as a socialist, I'm not exactly a huge fan of the Democratic Party for a few reasons. You know, obviously there's the obvious critiques about their policies not going far enough in some respects. But I think the biggest crime in my eyes is just the fucking feckless ineffectiveness of the Democratic Party and how they don't do anything. Is this the interview? It probably is, judging by the like-dislike ratio. Not sure if I'll be able to find it in time. I don't think that matters too much. I can just quote the interview, and then if I make this a segment... I am planning to still make the segment about the Texas border incident, even though I didn't do much editing. I was thinking if there weren't that many new developments in regards to that, I would sort of call it there and just not make that into a segment, but I kept the video around on my desktop in the event that something did come up, and boy howdy did something come up. Let's get started with the thing that I do have. That is Joe Biden's statement on this. So he responded finally to the situation in Texas. You remember how I was saying there were three options that I predicted. There were three options. Number one, respond, go full tilt, federalize the National Guard, send in troops to occupy the state, and, basically just forcefully settle the issue. No, you don't get to defy the Supreme Court. You're a fucking state. And all that. Option two being the sort of middle-of-the-road milquetoast option. This is what I kind of thought might happen, which is, some limited, oh, you know... some limited response that didn't quite go all the way, but it was more than nothing. And then the other possibility, which was just that Joe Biden actually doesn't do anything, waxes about some bullshit, and about how come on, you know, we're all on the same side here, don't do this, but ultimately doesn't do much about it. Apparently, I failed to consider the secret fourth option that Joe Biden picked. I am incredibly, I'm surprised that I didn't predict this, because it actually kind of seems obvious in retrospect, although it is disappointing. The secret fourth option is worse than all three of those. It's actually do exactly, play into the governor's hands, Governor Abbott in Texas, give the southern states there, or the red states, exactly what they want, and, you know, basically, provide the ground for this to just happen again in the future by demonstrating that you, the president of the fucking United States, are not going to act on, federal statute, federal, court decisions and whatever, right? Once the race is done, I'll get into the statement proper, but it is beyond pathetic. You know, and I'm quite frankly, I'm done saying anything positive about the Democratic Party at the federal level. I think the party is beyond fixing. That's why we have to attack it from the inside. You see, I'm a big fan of that idea. take action against open rebellion about the federal government. Yeah, he's too busy. You know, trying to get Netanyahu to answer his calls and stuff. You know, ooh, I miss you, babe, and that shit. To worry about literal secessionist shit. And imagine, for perspective, I know this isn't as severe, like not even close, to the secession crisis in 1860 that turned into the Civil War when the southern states attacked Fort Sumter. But imagine in that scenario, or in a scenario of similar political implications and dynamics to varying degrees, right? You have a block of very disloyal states acting in defense of a clearly inhumane line of policymaking against the federal government in such a way that would constitute insurrection. Imagine if Abe Lincoln had, like, seen that and been like, okay, I got it. We will do nothing. There would be no more United States. And I think this is actually, like, this actually sounds the death knell of the United States. I don't know how long in the future that's going to take effect. I don't know if something else is going to happen to cause us to change course. But if nothing else, like, significantly happens to, I don't know, correct course and whatever, you know, it is true that nothing ever happens until it does. This eventually is going to culminate in the United States breaking apart at the seams. Joe Biden has effectively given a fucking permission slip to every Republican governor that, hey, you no longer have to do anything that the federal government tells you because I'm not going to fucking intervene. And when the federal government is willing to do anything, it's always against people who are to their left and, like, protesting in favor of Palestinian rights and whatever. That here comes the this is where the Nancy Pelosi interview comes in. This was it was about a couple of different issues on CNN, but this, like, sent me over the edge because I was thinking about, you know, the events of just a couple days ago. Joe Biden basically capitulating to every governor that he could think of. And Nancy Pelosi was talking about, like, oh, you know, I understand that, like, the desire for humanitarian aid and whatever in the Gaza Strip. It's horrible that 20,000 people have died. But calling for a ceasefire is Putin's position. So actually, you are enemies of the state, and the FBI should investigate you. But also, even if these protests are genuine, the FBI should still investigate you because fucking I don't know.
One of the challenges that Democrats might have in organizing is some anger in some corners of the progressive movement over Joe Biden's support for Israel in its war against Hamas terrorists.
I have a feeling for what feelings they have, but we have to think about what we're doing. And what we have to do is try to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is women and children, people who don't have a place to go. So let's address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Some, I think, are connected to Russia, and I say that having looked at this for a long time now, as you know.
You think some of these protests are Russian plants?
I don't say they're plants. I think some financing should be investigated, and I want to ask the FBI to investigate that. But apart from that, let's just say it's all spontaneous and sincere.
Just absolutely no regard for the people that vote for them in the slightest. She even said some shit to try to pit the people that were, like, pro-Ukraine against people that are pro-Palestine because, you know, nobody really likes Putin except tankies, I guess. It was beyond infuriating. I sincerely doubt my ability to put this into words particularly gracefully. Holy shit. There's not much for me to say apart from Democratic abstemiousness is going to get us all killed. Seriously, Democrats put more effort into twisting their own party members' arms over the issue of, like, calling for a ceasefire in Palestine than they do into literally anything else. Like, throughout my several years of following politics, it has been the most consistent through line of everything that I have seen, that the Democrats never do anything until it comes to suppressing progressives. until it comes to preventing positive change. Then they're ready to go at a fucking moment's notice. They're on the case, all of that. Christ, man. America might fall in my lifetime. Base history is not dead. I'm gonna tell my grandkids how there was no scoping Russians and Texans while making 200 kilometers, walking 200 kilometers to school in 15 feet of snow. Base, you should tell your grandkids that. Would be awesome. Let me take a beat and then I'll resume. Joe Biden's statement. Let me read this. For too long, we all know the border's been broken. That's why 2 months ago I instructed my team to begin negotiations with a bipartisan group of senators to seriously and finally address the border crisis. Blah, blah, blah. Toughest and fairest set of reforms to secure the border, something, something. He's trying to out-Republican the Republicans. Additional 1,300 Border Patrol agents, 375 immigration judges, 1,600 asylum officers. That part is good. You always want to have enough resources to properly assess asylum claims coming into your country. Over 100 cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect and stop fentanyl. This is bullshit. Not going to do anything. For everyone demanding tougher border control, this is the way to do it. Yeah, this is literally the worst strategy that you could have pulled out of the fucking magic hat. Like, you had so many options. You picked the one that would make you lose the most. Like, actual optimally bad decision making here by Joe Biden and the administration. That statement, nobody on the left gives a shit about, like, secure the border, send border patrol agents, kill migrants on the way over. That's not left politics. You know what people on the left care about? Asylum. So, you know, that bears mentioning. But anybody who's on the left and has even a modicum of critical thinking, which is most people on the left, will know that that statement is absolutely bullshit and not designed to appeal to people on the left. It's waxing centrist bullshit that's catered more to the right than it is to the left. For all the grand total of 0 Republicans that will vote for Joe Biden. Thank you. I don't know what strategist is calling the shots behind the scenes, but they need to be hanged. Not just fired, but fucking hanged or something. And as far as I'm concerned, the entire Democratic Party leadership is fucking useless. And I've even run into people who have said, like, dude, the Democratic Party's not a monolith. Okay, then what is it? Like, if the defense of the Democratic Party, and this is like this, in the face of massive abstemiousness, except for when it comes to doing something bad, and then all of a sudden, we're all ears. If you're gonna look at that and say, well, hold on, you can't call them a monolith, then why the fuck do we have party labels in the first place? I don't give a shit. I will treat the federal Democratic Party as a monolith all I like, because that is how they act. If you're going to tell me that the Democratic Party is not actually like this, how about you show me some fucking examples of them not acting like this, and not, like, having a blatant disregard for the lives of people that vote for them? Because, Jesus Christ, you remember there was another video where I was talking about 1 in 5 young people are queer. This is the Democratic base that they're throwing under the bus. They're gonna get us all killed. Jesus Christ, between the Democrats conceding to Republicans and Republicans literally openly saying, like, I'm going to kill you, what are they doing? And the worst part of all this, you ready? The worst part of all of this is that I still have to go and vote for these clowns. Because at the end of the day, right, I talk a big game about, Democrats and Republicans and Democrats being leagues better. That's not a high bar to clear. Democrats, at the very least, don't actively want to kill me, if only because they would have to lift a fucking finger to do so. And then meanwhile, I vote for these people knowing that they're, it's just going to be like more of the exact same every time. Nothing good can happen. Nothing good is actually possible. We have to concede ground to every Republican that ever makes a demand, because otherwise, fucking, like, we would violate a rule or something. Seriously, this is a tendency that I've noticed in the Democratic Party, and it explains a good bit of their behavior, right? A lot of the Democratic abstemiousness can be explained very accurately by the fact that they are obsessed with rules, laws, and guidelines, right? And when I say that, I mean, like, in government, like rules of decorum, fucking Senate rules that nobody will be, punished for breaking, mind you, unless they're a progressive, in which case they will be literally ousted from the party. And in some cases, yes, even laws that Republicans have zero reservations about breaking, and that ultimately no politician should have any reservation about breaking if they are confident in their policy agenda as something that is popular with Americans, right? Republicans have zero regard for the law as they barrel full speed towards the genocide of trans and queer people more broadly, right? Why can they do that, right, with a fucking psychotic set of policy objectives, and then the Democrats are so piss scared of violating the rules that they don't do anything? Seriously, that's like the surest shot of not breaking any rules is just to not do anything at all. Why do they do this? That's mostly rhetorical. I know why Democrats are like this, right? Democrats are liberals, and liberals, as we know, are cringe, right? Many such cases. One of the biggest ideological failings of liberals is that their ideology, their system of ethics, fundamentally is whatever the law says. There might be some fluff around that. They might have some core of moral right and wrong, but at the end of the day, liberals separate that from politics. Yes, institutionalism. I'm getting to that. And their core principles is if it breaks the rules, it's wrong. They're a bunch of conformist bitches. They're basically just fascists in hippie clothing. Liberals are nothing but fascists in denial about being fascist, and therefore they are afraid to act because they would do the fascist thing if they did anything. So they choose to do nothing. And they do this all in the name of, as Flat Earth Dennis pointed out, institutionalism. They are absolutely obsessed with the rules of the institutions that they and their forefathers have created, but not so obsessed that they will actually act to defend them. Liberals are obsessed with not rocking the boat. If anything would spark any sort of political backlash, a liberal will not get within 5 miles of it. Which is why you get stuff like this scenario with Greg Abbott and all these other red state governors fucking revolting over border policy, and Joe Biden just deciding, let's concede over them because they will go quietly. This is literally the strategy of appeasement, by the way. Liberals did this in the 1930s with when Hitler started making demands for land, and broadly Europe in some sense was guilty of this when Vladimir Putin annexed Crimea. And so too are the Democrats guilty of this when the Republicans decide that they don't have to do what the fucking Supreme Court of this country says. And this isn't like federal governments either. This is state governments. This isn't even the government that has the authority to decide they're not going to do what the Supreme Court says, right? So, as I will now reiterate again, for fear of breaking the rules that liberals have set up to prevent them from doing anything, liberals instead choose to do nothing because inaction is perfectly in accordance with the rules of American legal institutions and liberal institutions in any country. However, doing something inevitably breaks a rule. Nothing can ever change. Nothing ever happens, except when it does, in which case liberals will do nothing to respond, and they will allow it to happen, especially if it's something bad. If it's something good, they're on the case. Oh. Institutionalism is a bitch. It's going to get everybody in this country fucking murked. And it's going to get a lot of people killed. And for that, I absolutely despise the Democratic Party. Seriously, they very well might hate their base as much as Republicans hate queer people. The only difference between them and the Republicans is that they actually have to lift a finger to do something about it, so they don't. Meanwhile, Republicans are driven by such an animalistic sense of raw hatred that they can't stop themselves from doing something. Meanwhile, liberals, that's all they ever do is stop themselves from doing things. They when it comes to shooting themselves in the foot, losing elections, and generally being incompetent, they are hyper competent. Nancy Pelosi, in an interview on CNN, was talking about the Democratic base and how young people are upset and she's the victim of protests from the left and whatever. All of that is expertly crafted rhetoric designed to drive a wedge between subsections of the Democratic electorate. But ultimately, I think I've just about gone on for long enough about this issue. I think everybody knows where I stand on it, and hopefully you can sort of see what my argument is and where I'm coming from, and also understand that I'm really not interested in this being like a subject of argument or debate. The Democratic Party is just like this, and if you like anybody who thinks otherwise, I sincerely hope that you are not counting on living to see the next the next half of this century. So I will just wrap it up by saying this country is fucking cooked. Obviously, I'm going to not stop like doing volunteer work and activism and phone banking and whatever, because I would like for this country to not be cooked. But at the end of the day, this country's fucked, and there's not much that any of us can do to fix it, because the two parties in power either A, are invested in its downfall and descent into a like madman fascist dictatorship, or B, are willing to abide by the former if it means that they don't break any rules in so doing. Holy shit. Future me, cut that segment.